Growing demand for U.S. farm products abroad, how can agriculture overcome public skepticism of foreign trade to negotiate new trade agreements and open new world markets? We will begin this discussion with 1 minute of quiet time, during which each competitor will be able to prepare their 30-second opening statement. Following the opening statements, they will have 25 minutes of open discussion, followed by 1 minute of quiet time for the competitors to prepare their 1 minute closing statement. Official time is kept by the timekeeper. At this time, competitors, you now have 1 minute to prepare your opening statements. Time has been called. Competitors, in voluntary order, make your 30-second opening statements. Please stand and direct your opening statements to the audience. The timer will indicate when your 30 seconds have elapsed by holding up a red card. You may begin.
According to Pew Research, the vast majority of Americans do not favor foreign trade. However, the United States consumes 18% of the world's chocolate, and cocoa is a substance that cannot be grown in the continental U.S. So I think if Americans could see that some of these products are necessary and trade is important, we might be able to change our minds, and that's our challenge this evening.
I'm excited for this topic. This topic reminds me of the North Star. And the reason it reminds me of the North Star is the North Star never moves. This topic's never going to go away. It's can we help view it in a different light? The galaxy always keeps moving around the North Star, but we have to view it in different places at different times. And I think our view on this is really important. And if we were able to change the view of other people on this, I think it's going to help us a lot. So I'm excited for this discussion.
Trade agreements are really complex, and most people in America don't actually understand how trade affects them. President Trump right now is pushing for fair trade instead of free trade, but that doesn't help us as farmers and ranchers to open new world markets. I'm excited to have for this conversation so that we can talk about ways that Farm Bureau can help us to open new markets so that we can have trade that provides lasting results instead of is about feelings.
American farmers now produce enough food to feed around 500 million people. That's 200 million more people than we have in America. And without trade, agriculture would die in America. We need that trade to get rid of our goods. But people are scared. They have concerns, and they've had reasons to. I personally have seen problems with trade agreements that hurt some farmers and benefit others. I think as we listen to their concerns and their fears and work together to come up with solutions that benefit both farmers and address concerns of the people, that ag can be more successful than it ever has been before in America.
You have heard the opening statements. The competitors may now proceed with the discussion. Competitors, please direct your discussion to your fellow panel members.
So Andrew, you mentioned that we can be successful moving forward if we can change public perception. How do we do that?
You know, I look to some of the instances that I've had problems with free trade as it's been. We look at Mexico, we've been a net importer from them. We don't send more goods to them than they send to us. Canada is pretty close, at least for agriculture. I'm talking about agriculture for these things. It's been really close. And so it's hard for us to see the benefits, I think, sometimes. I know that with potatoes, for us, sometimes these free trade agreements have actually hurt us because Mexico has blocked all potatoes, and Canada sends over just as much as we send back.
It's important, I think, to kind of break this down. Public perception of trade, I think, is kind of a misnomer a little bit because most people actually favor exports, and that's according to Pew Research. It's the imports that they worry about. And so I think that sometimes we have to kind of look at those separately because that's two separate issues with people, and so it's a little easier to convince them, hey, we have the safest food supply according to the CDC, and we have the highest quality. For example, in terms of beef, we have pretty much the best beef in the world, and so people have a demand for our beef compared to, say, Brazil and Australia that have more beef than us, but it's not as high a quality. So people want our exports, and I think we could easily convince the public, yeah, it's okay to send that, However, getting imports becomes the problem that we need to face. And so, Joanna, what do you think about convincing people that imports are okay, that that's something that we can tolerate in the United States?
Well, I think it's very much a PR problem. Right now, there's a big push for organic food in season. That's kind of what the consumer wants right now, is they're really into what did, like the paleo diet, what do people eat, and when did they eat it? And so I think we also need to recognize that a lot of what we import is the stuff that we can't grow here. And so educating the people that the products that we are importing are not necessarily the watermelons in June. That's not, or the watermelons in January is not the big problem. It's that we're importing chocolate and we're importing coffee. I mean, coffee is incredibly important to the majority of the people in the United States. And so recognizing that what we're talking about when we talk about importing is their coffee, making it personal for them. So it's not just about an export or an import, but instead it's about products and what those products look like on your table.
I think that's really important because what we're talking about is we're talking about how can this help Farm Bureau of Idaho. And I think Farm Bureau has done a great job as far as the view from people, but I think you said a really great thing. It's what do consumers want. I remember when I was a kid, we didn't eat blueberries certain times of the year, we didn't eat watermelon certain times of the year, and so it's one of those give and take things that I think it's a necessity. It's, are we doing it the right way? I feel that sometimes if we can eliminate a middle person and we can actually do that trade right back and forth, it makes things a lot more harmonious. And we've talked a lot today about networking and communication through our different activities, and I think that's a big part of trade.
You know, I agree with all this, and I think it's a great starting point too. I think that we have to look at the problem that people are having and the concerns that they're having, and it doesn't only apply to the regular American, but to agriculture as well. We have countries that subsidize their farming or their production of things. They subsidize labor. They have unfair labor practices. You know, they don't have rules. The EPA, all these different things. I think is why America worries. And I think there are things that we could address correctly. And maybe I think that fair is important, making the trade deals so that they're fair. And if we can do that, I think we can benefit not only ag, but also America as a whole and get people on board with it.
Well, almost 80% of underdeveloped countries approve exports to developed nations like the United States, while roughly 20% of developed nations, the public views that as a positive thing. And so those countries, like you say, Andrew, where they don't have, you know, the smog regulations and some of these things that we face as producers, they like to produce those goods and then come and sell them here for high prices. And I think one of the problems that we run into with that is our consumers still like those cheap goods. It's important for us to be able to be competitive with those cheaper goods because they can be produced at a much lower price point than maybe we could do it here in the United States. And so how do we do that, Jason?
That's what I was going to ask you, is how do you, or how does Farm Bureau help us be competitive with that? I mean, that's a great question, but how do they do that?
Well, so I read an interesting article in Beef Magazine about Argentina, and Argentina at one time was the #3 exporter of beef in the world. And they have a lot of cows down in Argentina, much more than we have. They were behind Brazil and Australia in exports of beef. And the government looked at that and they said, you know, the beef price here locally for our people is too high. And so we're going to put a 15% tax on beef exports. And they thought that that would help their local people. Well, what it did was it made the beef so uneconomical to produce that people actually started growing soybeans because that was much more economical. So now they're not even in the top 10 beef exports. So they literally destroyed that industry in their own country, just trying to help their people. So I think we have to be kind of careful in terms of how we approach legislation. I think that's where Farm Bureau comes in because of our policies that we have. We can get feedback from a lot of our members and help them, you know, or have them help us to draft policy and in turn legislation that will protect our ability to sell here locally as well as abroad.
I think that's one of the main important things at the county level is the wording for some of this can come straight from our resolutions. And as we get involved at the county level to kind of create some of these resolutions so that we can have the wording for what we need as producers to be able to export some of our goods, that we're able to, Farm Bureau is able to use the wording, the resolutions, and take it to the national level so that they're not having to duplicate work. We can help at that grassroots level, at our county and state level, and then Farm Bureau at the national level can take it to the legislators to make a big difference.
You know, I think we're talking about what to do once we have a plan and a solution. You know, that's a great way to do it. But I still don't think we've really talked about the concerns that people have and overcoming them.
So what are the concerns? Because I see concerns being maybe wondering where their food came from. I mean, in my little niche market, as far as beef, I can sell beef directly to the consumer because they know where it came from. And people like that. So how can we go ahead and make other people feel like it's okay? And how can Farm Bureau help us with this? Is it labeling? Is it
I don't think it's food
viewpoints?
though. And I think that's the thing, because I think that most people would be on board with exporting food. And I know people love to have their fruits and vegetables all during the year. They don't want to have that be limited. I think it's the things like Detroit losing all their factories. You know, I think it's those things that America is scared about. And so I think it's some of those things that we have to talk about and belay those concerns. I think people love the food supply the way it is. I think they're happy with it, but we've got to address their other concerns so that we can push the ag trade to our benefit.
And we talked a little bit about before, you know, people are nervous about, you know, some of these exports and imports and the effect that it's going to have on them. But I also think that they like those cheaper prices. And so I think that's the combat that we have is, you know, you see all the time, buy American, right? And so there's a big push on social media, you know, buy American, support your local businesses. But the tough part is we still see giant strides being made by online retailers like Amazon. People can even buy, you know, fruits and vegetables on Amazon now because it's theoretically cheaper. And so I still think that economically, that's our biggest hurdle because people, you know, we'd like to think that they're going to buy American and buy local, but they're going to buy whatever's cheapest. And so I still think that's kind of our major problem here.
So how do we push that to them though? How do we get that to people and how do we make the changes happen?
I think that we've got to enact legislation to protect our exports. We've got to negotiate better deals, basically. And that's one thing that President Trump has looked at. He came out very strongly against the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was a trade agreement that was negotiated by President Obama. And that was something that was actually endorsed by Secretary Clinton for a while. And then she flip-flopped on that and she came out against it just because Bernie Sanders had so much success railing against that agreement. And so I think that through Farm Bureau and through our advocacy, we've got to negotiate better deals that protect our local farmers and make these goods cheaper for the consumer. And so then they'll start voting with their wallet.
You know, I think you hit it on the head though, where you said that Trump's come in there and the thing that he's emphasized is America first. And I think if these trade deals are tweaked just a little bit, so that maybe instead of being a little bit more in the opposing country's favor, maybe it's just a little bit in ours. And most of these people, most of these countries, want to get goods in enough to our country that they'd be willing to take that deal. I believe.
So a few years ago, all of our, there was a big push to put made in the different countries, the country of origin push. And then it came out that that was, by the World Trade Organization, that was illegal, but people really liked knowing where their food was coming from. And so I think, Andrew, as you were talking about tweaking little things, that might be something that we could tweak a little bit in those agreements, is to create a voluntary way for for countries of origin to place some labeling on there so that consumers know where things are coming from. So that and I am guilty of it 100%. I am an Amazon shopper. I have 3 children. I love that things come to my door. But if I knew while I was shopping that this product was 5 cents more, 10 cents more, but I knew on the website that it was made in America, I probably would pick that because I now know where it's from. I know the quality that we have in the United States, and that quality is important to hang on to and important to publicize.
I think we've talked about this all day, is the knowledge. I mean, we can make this topic go politically as we want, but what can Farm Bureau do? And I think we've talked about knowledge, we've talked about different things earlier today, but it really gets down to what can Farm Bureau do? What can we do and Farm Bureau help us do? I mean, we can talk about politics, we can talk about making America great again, and I think it's really important. And I love people that buy American-made products, but I deal with enough agricultural people on a day-to-day basis. It's either price-driven or it's on demand.
Well, I think that's where it comes back to, going back to our communities and back to those resolutions. We have the power to write wording for legislature at a community level. And we have the power to give Farm Bureau the words that we as producers need for the national level. And if we can create the resolutions and create the wording and create the laws and the guidelines that would benefit us as producers, then the legislature is already there. All they have to do is work it into their trade agreements.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Joanna, going back, I just love where this is going. I think it goes back to what you said in your opening statement. People don't understand trade. And so I love what you were kind of going with there. I wonder if we can't do little tweaks and be willing to go and try to push a little bit of tweaks, starting at the county level. Say, you know what, let's just make these deals look a little bit in our favor. And then if we hit it with publicity, we get out to all our neighbors, we get Farm Bureau on the side. I think a lot of people, just by having those little tweaks and advertising it, I think they jump on board because they didn't know it was there to start with.
Yeah, I have a very non-farming network, and I did a little poll within my network, and all of them were for agricultural exports. All of them were for agricultural trade. And I think that the public skepticism that this question is talking about, trade agreements encompass everything. Trade agreements encompass manufacturing and agriculture. It's not this is our trade agreement for agriculture, and this is our trade agreement for manufacturing. And there's a lot of public skepticism around manufacturing, what we bring into our country. And it's less about trade, or less about food, and more about jobs with public skepticism.
So Andrew and Joanna, you guys both kind of mentioned the skepticism and your local kind of grassroots efforts. One of the problems that I saw when I was researching this question is 60% of Democrat voters were in favor of some of these trade agreements. Well, roughly 25% of Republican voters were in favor of trade agreements. And so even within our own ideology, we're struggling to convince people that these are positive things. And so I think that you're really on the right track as far as getting the communities involved, particularly in a state like Idaho, which is definitely conservative in nature. But in terms of getting people to accept these things, I still don't know how you make that jump if we can't even convince our own friends and neighbors that this is important.
Well, the reason, this is a question, why do your friends and neighbors not? Because they probably don't understand it. Because I think once you're able to look at a picture, and I kind of said that in my opening statement, it's just how you look at things. And when you actually see the full picture, maybe you're able to view it differently.
We're from the generation of Facebook News and CNN Live. I mean, most of our information is, as a community, as a society, is gathered over social media. And I love the things that Farm Bureau Advocacy has been doing and the videos it's been producing, but I would love to see Farm Bureau take that another step further. And as you're scrolling through your Facebook videos, the next one pops up and, oh, there's this ag video that's all about ag in Idaho, because they're marketing things to specific people based on their search history, based on all this information. And so I'd love to see more Farm Bureau take that advocacy another step and be able to put more of those videos on social media, because that's where the information is coming from now for most people.
You know, Dusty, you said that 25% of Republicans are for it and 60% of Democrats. Farmers are the ones that make up the center of the country where the majority of those Republicans are. That means with an organization like this, if we can tweak it a little bit so farmers also feel a little bit of support, we have a lot of power to make that happen. You know, if the Democrats were 100% against it, and then the Republicans were halfway, we'd have a really strong hurdle. But if it's the Republicans we have to change, that's probably a good portion of this organization. It covers most of that area. So if we can use what Joanna's saying here and get the farmers educated, the people that are already our friends and neighbors, that's probably where we can get the nation's approval to move forward with this.
Well, the growing demand portion of this question, I think that's the incentive that we have to use, and kind of like you said, Andrew, to get people involved as far as drafting policy and drafting legislation, but also looking at these markets and saying, there's a lot of demand because our products are so high quality and because they're so safe. The United States has the cheapest food supply in the world by far, and so a lot of our people aren't spending a lot on food and other goods just because of our cheap imports, but also the cheap production of making our food. And so I think that if we could somehow harness those other markets and get people to see the benefit, they talk all the time about, the number one thing on people's mind is the economy. Is this going to create jobs? Is this going to put more money in my pocket? And as they start to see that this trade is benefiting them, and so when we make these agreements, when we say, hey, we have the best products available and we'd like to sell it, in your country or in your market, if people see that that's putting money in their pocket, I think that that's a way that we can advance this. Because we talk about, well, yeah, go talk to your neighbors, but at the end of the day, I still think that they need to see the financial benefit.
Sure, the picture, and I think that you brought up a good point, is if our commodities are something that's sought after, people are going to want it. And if they want our products, and so ensuring that we have the best products, and I think Farm Bureau does a great job with that, is we have good products here in the U.S., and particularly Idaho, and people want our products. So I think that's a great point that you made there.
I think we've done a great job of talking about how we can get better trade agreements and that benefit us more. And I'd like to kind of shift a minute and talk about how we can open up some new world markets. Because if we're constantly having trade agreements that are always in our favor, I wonder if that might close some doors that might have otherwise been opened for some new world markets.
China is the best example of that right now. That's why President Trump has come out so strongly against China, because the ratio of import-export with China is horrendous. And so he's really kind of been beating that drum like, hey, you guys sell a lot of goods here. We need to return the favor. And so I think that a lot of those countries, if we stop importing some of their goods, maybe we can negotiate better deals. Kind of like you said, Andrew, little bits at a time.
The key is there, though, is these countries want America. I think for some reason we have this mentality that we need the rest of the world, that we have to have them or we're going to die, and we just can't do without. We can't do without our fancy TVs from China and our iPhones. But the reality is, these countries need us to buy that. They need us. Without it, they run out of money. They don't have things to send out. China can have 10 billion iPhones, and it's going to do them no good because they won't have any customers unless you get like America and these other places. So I think it's just really going back to helping people understand and legislators express our view that, maybe we lose it for a year. But at the same time, these countries have to understand we're not going to do everything in their favor because it benefits both of us. And it probably benefits them more than it does us. So let's make it a little bit in our favor.
I think you always got to be kind of protecting yourself, but is that where the free trade comes involved? Because the new free trade, the way it sounds to me, is it's 6 apples for 6 apples. So it's got to be the same give and take. And so I don't know if that's good for us or it's bad for us. What do you think?
Well, that's fair trade. Fair trade
Fair
is
trade.
6%.
That's right.
Yeah, and I think that getting a good deal is important, but a pound of beef or a cow sold is still a cow off the market. And these are perishable products that we're dealing with. And if we say, we'll hold off for a year, then we'll get a better deal. What are we going to do in that year with these perishable products? Beef cattle you can hang on to, but there's the products out there that you can't hang on to for a year.
I agree with you, Joanna, that there are perishables. A lot of our goods, though, our countries, a lot of these aren't perishable. A lot of corn, wheat, stuff like that. One example that I have, though, this fair trade or free trade that concerns me is once we make it free and we get rid of all the tariffs and all the other restrictions, I've seen this in the potato industry, they'll go find a specific pest or a little problem that they can then say, sorry, we're not taking your thing. And they find ways to block it without violating the free trade agreement, but at the same time hurting us. And that's why, going back, it's still so important that we need really aggressive people on this that are really saying, well, you know what, if we're not sure on that pest, then I guess we're going to have to cut it off both ways and make it fair. Because I think America, for the most part, is always trying to figure out how to get it. People have to have their chocolate.
Yeah.
We're not going to cut off the chocolate supply because
I'm not kidding.
but they'll cut off the potato supply because they can supply it on their own and send out more exports and make more money over something that probably shouldn't be a problem.
So to summarize the discussion that we're having then, I think we all can agree that we need to have strong people negotiating these agreements with these countries that are kind of taking advantage of us. But we also need to have organizations like Farm Bureau that are showing people how this benefits them, and in turn getting them to vote favorably towards these trade agreements that will benefit not only the consumer but also the producers here in America. Is that
Yeah,
kind of where this
I think that's,
discussion
I
is?
think that's right, and I think that it starts from the ground level, because we have to first help people like me have the knowledge of knowing what trade is, but also so they can have a form of opinion, and it can go up through the legislature like we've seen here, and the process of Farm Bureau. But yeah, definitely having people in power to do that.
I think also Farm Bureau can help us to create some really great relationships with some of these people that we're exporting to. I know that Idaho Farm Bureau just hosted the Mexico to come up and look at some of the mills that we have. And one of the things that came out of that visit is that there's a lot of instability around trade, and so they're nervous about trading with us because will they be able to count on us to be able to trade with them if NAFTA disappears? And so I think that Farm Bureau has this unique position that they can not only help with the legislature surrounding the trade agreements, but they can also build these relationships that are so necessary to opening new world markets.
So we need to network with other countries. Just like we network here at Farm Bureau, we need to kind of go globally, because we know that the more we network here, the better off we are individually and as Farm Bureau. So as globally, we need to do the same networking, correct?
The world is getting a lot smaller every second.
Yeah, so in order to make this happen and to make actual change occur, it sounds like right now today, we all need to become a little more educated. I'm sure each and every one of you, as you study for this topic, you learn things about trade that you didn't know. You found new avenues. I didn't know that there was food for 500 million people in America, so if we run out of that, we're in trouble. But I think we start right at our county levels. We start talking to our boards. We get those resolutions in. Once our people understand, if we can get it on the state level and then on the federal level and really push that it gets pushed down, we can then start to see the social media. We can start to see that video that talks, is free trade going to help us or hurt us? And if we get the individuals committed to it, that's when we can start to see it spread. And just like Dusty said, 25% of Republicans are in favor of it. So we've got a lot of people we can work with. People that are probably in this organization, if we will get to them and start right now today at the county and work our way up.
I think you're right too, that the more we get these people involved from our counties, from our organization, through Farm Bureau, the more ownership there will be within it. And so the more support that we'll have towards trade, and the more little tweaks we'll be able to make along the way. Because if we do say, we're going to take potatoes off the foreign market for a year to China, then people are more on board. Like, yes, we're behind you. We know the process. We know this isn't a finite thing, that we're just going to be holding on to our potatoes for a long time. We're able to have that relationship at the farmer level as well as across America and across the world, so that everybody's behind it and there's some ownership in these decisions and in these tweaks that we're making.
So there's one other way, and you kind of mentioned it, the viewpoint from another country for us, and you kind of mentioned that, and I had an aha moment. What is their view to us? If we did take potatoes off the market for a little while, what would that do for our relationship with them? I mean, we know possibly, and Farm Bureau organization.
Time has been called. Please prepare your closing statements. I ask that the audience remain silent for 1 minute to aid the competitors in preparation.
I really enjoyed this conversation. I really appreciated learning from you guys today. I think that we can all agree that trade is important, opening new world markets is important, and that having good agreements to make our products more accessible on a national and on a world level is very important. And as we create good relationships with not only our legislators, but also other world markets, we'll be able to make agreements that are going to benefit farmers and benefit the U.S. as a whole.
I'm proud to be a member of Farm Bureau, and I think that it affords us the opportunity to overcome some of the challenges that are posed by this question. We know that we have wonderful products here in the United States. We know that those are sought after in the world. And the key to this is overcoming the public skepticism. And I think Farm Bureau is the perfect vehicle to accomplish that. As we work both on the grassroots levels, like Joanna said, as well as nationally with our legislators, we are able to overcome those challenges and negotiate better trade deals so that we can sell our products abroad as well as import things at cheap prices. And so our consumers will be benefited by that as well as our producers.
This is a great conversation, and I think it's something we all could agree that this is something that can be solved. As we work together in our counties, as we educate ourselves, as we educate others, we can find deals that work for everybody. But we kind of got to take our cap off and think about the rest of the country, not agriculture, which we like to focus on agriculture. Through educating them, through taking these deals and making them slightly advantageous towards America, I think we can sell people on this. And we already have the group of people that we need to sell this on. So as we continue to work together, start in the counties and get these resolutions up, I think we can see this happen and make ag the most successful it has been in the history of mankind.
I think this was a great discussion today. I think this is a humanitarian aid. If we look across the world and how different tragedies have happened, there's always going to be a need for trade. There's going to be a need for trade for us, there's going to be a need for trade for another country. I think if we continue to be bold in our action and our thought, and at the grassroots level, we'll be able to combat this. But most importantly is we need to be able to teach and learn what trade really is. This has been fun. Thanks.